Hey, this is Dr. Reilly. Today we're going to talk about a dietary intervention for depression. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, we could see that since 2015, that the rates of antidepressant use have been going up every year. So obviously, there's a need to figure out something so that way we don't end up, by the time my grandchildren are alive, that they'll be all of a sudden everybody being on antidepressants. And it's not just us, it's the whole world is ending up more on antidepressants, right? And it's just scary how this is just increasing over the last couple of decades, right? Because I became a pediatrician in 97, and yeah, now it's really like a huge percentage of people. I mean, it was a huge percentage of people on antidepressants back then, but now it's even worse. It's gone up by like 50%. So so we have to figure it out, right? So luckily, some people have already figured it out, some smart people. And so this is one of them. They had done a study in Australia where they took some teenagers. There were guys who were first part of college, and they actually wanted to find people who were depressed, and they decided, look, let's make an intervention where we actually teach them what is healthy kind of food, and then see what happens. See if this actually makes them less depressed. And guess what? It does. And it wasn't even a lot. It was just like 3 weeks. They became less depressed, and it lasted for years. And it required very little doctor intervention, which is great. They only had to actually teach them a little bit about it, and then it's just like they just took the information and they took off, right? They did great. Now, obviously, these are kids in college, so it's the kind of thing that they're good at learning. But if we could just do this for everybody, then this would give us a hope that perhaps in the future we won't have so many kids um, on not even just like one medicine, but multiple medicines for depression, right? So what do we have to do? We have to be willing to change, right? So that's the biggest thing. And then that is the problem sometimes when you're depressed, or if you're a busy mom and your kid is depressed and you're like, oh man, this is just another thing that I have to do. But the dividends are so good that I would encourage everybody that's watching this, and that if they're struggling with depression, or if they have a kid who's suffering depression, that they should really try to make these kind of changes. Because I would tell you, when I talk to people, it seems like it's a lot in the beginning, and then when they're middle of the way, they're like, yeah, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And when at their end, they're kind of like, no, this is fine, because I don't have to do a lot of thinking about eating anymore. It's just become kind of second nature to me. And that's really the hardest thing, is breaking our habits, changing the things that we're doing. But it's all worth it if we could kind of prevent a kid from ending up on a medicine, right? So what do we have to do? So in the trial, they told people to drink a lot of water, because all the sugary drinks make depression worse. That's just how it is, right? So kids always ask me, well, what's the maximum amount of sugary drinks that I could drink before I get sick? And that's a very good question, and nobody knows the answer to that question. But I would say that if I was the sicker I was, the more I would drink no sugary drinks. And for my kids who have prediabetes, it seems like even once a week, having a sugary drink is hurtful. So I have to imagine there's probably something similar, where probably occasional sugary drink is not once a day, which like a lot of people think. It's maybe once every other week, or maybe once a month. So it really should be that we're trying not to drink these other kind of things as much as possible. It's just trying to drink as much water as we possibly can. Now, in general, I also think like seltzer is usually okay. And if somebody wanted to drink, certainly if they had depression, some of these kind of herbal teas. Just the only things I would try to stay away from things with like caffeine and things like that, because they all have side effects in terms of sleep. And we know that lack of sleep causes people to have issues. Like, for example, if you drink, let's say, 2 cups of coffee in the morning, we know that when it's time for the kid to go to sleep, there's going to be at least a half a cup of coffee. It's like drinking a half a cup of coffee right before you go to sleep, which I think almost everybody would agree that's an incredibly a bad idea. What they told them to do is try to eat fish, right? So they tried to get them to eat fish 3 times a week. Um, I put here a picture of the fish oil because some people are allergic to fish, and so they have to figure out other kind of ways. Although actually, this would not be the kind of fish oil I would use if you were allergic to fish. They have certain algal fish oils that are apparently fine for people who are allergic to fish. But some people just hate fish, right? They just despise when I mention fish. They make the crinkly face, right? So yeah. So that if you're not going to eat fish, all right, that's fine. But maybe you could take a high quality fish oil, and that might be good. And I think that most people agree that these kind of Nordic kind of naturals are some of the highest ones. They told them to eat more uh, olive oil, so they actually, I think, gave them olive oil, and they said they made them a goal of trying to have a little bit of olive oil every day, and it's probably one of the things that there is a lot of these kind of chemicals in olive oil that's probably good for us, right? So if we could actually have some olive oil, sprinkle in our food, or eat some olives, that probably is all goodness for our brain health. And when they did the studies, yeah, that when they started eating like this, they got less depressed. They also told them to eat more spices. So it's the kind of thing that two spices in particular are kind of thought to prevent depression or help with depression, and they're turmeric and cinnamon. And so what they did is they actually gave them these spices, and they said, yeah, try to put this in your food every day. So you can imagine that they gave it to them, that encouraged them to do it. If you're a parent, most likely, and you're watching this video, I would just buy it and just try to figure out a way to add turmeric and cinnamon to some of your favorite kind of meals, right? I can't help myself but to meddle, and like pepper has also been shown to be helpful for a lot of this kind of stuff. So if you add pepper to your food, I can't help but think that it probably would be something that would be helpful. So this is kind of what their advice was. So was try to eat vegetables 5 servings per day. If you see in my other videos, you'll see the vegetables that we think are kind of the highest rated ones in terms of depression, especially leafy vegetables, peppers, and the cruciferous type vegetables. The We try to get them to have fruits. Now, the only thing I might say is from a lot of the kids who are depressed also have problems with metabolic syndrome where they're having insulin resistance, too high their sugars, etc. And so then ideally I try to get them to have their fruit more like the middle of the day. So kind of like have a fruit with lunch and a fruit after school. That tends to be like a good way to kind of get your fruit. Fruit in the morning and fruit at night seems to interfere with our metabolism, especially fruit at night seems to make our sleep a little bit less sound. So it's probably a better idea to try to have fruit more like in the middle of the day. Whole grain cereals, that same thing, right? You have to be a little bit careful. Whole grain cereal is still sugar. Certainly, the more unrefined it is, the less problematic it is. But for some of my insulin resistant people, we'll just skip that and try to have extra vegetables or protein. Usually, we're going to try to have some kind of meat, poultry, eggs, something like that every day to try to see if we can kind of provide all the nutrients that you need to prevent depression. Remember, for everything on this list, but especially for some of these proteins, the healthier the food that you're eating, the healthier you're going to be. So if you eat, for example, beef that was fed only corn and was devoid of omega-3 fatty acids by the time you get a chance to eat the meat, then that's not going to be as healthy as eating a grass-fed, grass-finished animal who was out in the sun, had adequate vitamin D, had omega-3, all these other kind of nutrients that are helpful for our body. Unsweetened dairy, yeah. So you just have to be careful with dairy also because it can have sugar. And if it has sugar, that seems to take away a lot of the good effects. So usually cheeses, but again, just reading the cheeses, making sure there's no added chemicals. That's usually a good way to go. Some of my girls with hormone problems, if they have dairy, they'll get themselves into trouble. And I usually will switch them to like almond milk, but perhaps unsweetened. So that way they're not getting extra sugar in their body. Fish. Yeah, fish is great, has everything in it that's good for us. Just again, if it comes from a country that is known to have their fish contaminated, then we probably should try to avoid that. Try to stick to things like from America that usually tend to be a little bit higher standards. Nuts and seeds also, nutritional powerhouses, good ways to get a lot of different kind of vitamins. And olive oil, like we were talking about, and the different kind of spices. If we could kind of figure out a way to eat this kind of stuff every day, then apparently we'll do very good in terms of depression. And so what does it look like? Because this is always the kind of thing, right? That when I see someone, a patient will say to me, oh, yep, give me a sample menu and that's all I'll eat for the rest of my life, which obviously is a little bit ridiculousness, right? In a way, they're just trying to make it easy on themselves so they don't have to think. But there's going to be changes, right? And obviously the traditional Norwegian diet versus the traditional Japanese diet versus the traditional Mediterranean diet, they have all different components. They cook them all in different ways, but they seem like they're all excellent in terms of depression. So yeah, I just put this here as perhaps like what I would eat, but obviously this is not gospel. You guys can figure out what you're going to be eating. Luckily, there is a wonderful thing called the internet, and you can Google things like healthy breakfast, healthy lunch, healthy dinner, and you can get various recipes, things that align themselves more with your culture. But yeah, usually it is the kind of thing you just want to make sure that you're following those simple rules like we saw. If your idea is that you're going to have pancakes, then try to make it whole grain, although I would usually try to get people to have almond flour pancakes, so that way I can get my nuts and maybe put some pumpkin seeds inside of it, sprinkle some cinnamon, and then bueno, right? And then usually it's the kind of thing that trying to make sure I get my vegetables, my fruits, all these different kind of nutrients in the day, because it's the variety, the balance, that seems to be the most important thing in terms of eating the healthier kind of foods, right? So along with buying olive oil, you want to make sure that you have maybe some nut butters, so that way you can maybe kind of get some nuts and so put them on the fruit. So apple slices with a nut butter, that's a very typical kind of like snack that somebody might have, or they might have that at a different time of day, something fast if they needed something to get them on their way to school or something like that. Those are usually fine. My advice to people is to buy them so that way you have them. Once you have them in the house, then you can Google and figure out. If you're like, I don't want to buy them until I figure out, then you're never going to buy them, right? It's better to just go all in and decide what you're going to do. Being prepared is the most important thing, but actually just kind of saying to yourself, yep, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to make it happen, right? And one of the ways you can kind of keep yourself honest is keeping all your shopping receipts. In the study that they ask people to do this, and it's a good way. If you know that you're going to be checking your shopping receipts, then it's the kind of thing that you'll make sure that nothing shows up on the shopping receipts that's not good for you. You want it to be stuff that's all going to be healthy, things that you can find in nature. So this is actually one of the most interesting things in this study for me, right? Was that they looked to see what was the most important thing. Was it more important to increase the healthy food you ate? So like for me, it would be like increasing the vegetables, because that's usually what the kids complain about. They usually give me the, I don't like vitamins kind of thing. Or was it more important, because these are all college students, so obviously they were not very compliant, right? But was it more important to take away the bad food, the processed food, the food with a lot of like oils, sugars, and processed carbohydrates? And it seemed like it was cutting out the junk food. That was actually the thing, that it's almost like the junk food was the poison that actually almost like made their brain malfunction. Now, obviously, when they take away the junk food, they replace it with some other kind of food, which invariably was almost always healthier. So it's hard to tease out this kind of stuff. But yeah, if I was going to say what was the most important thing, it probably would be look for the foods that you're eating that come in packages, that they have like a laundry list of ingredients, that they're high in sugar, that if we're drinking our sugars, that's not good. If we're having a lot of like sugary processed snacks, that's not good. If we're eating a lot of fast food, then we have to try to plan, make a lot of food, and then heat it up when we get home. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Because in fact, that's like the easiest hack for a lot of this kind of stuff, that if you're going to need extra food, just make extra food, right? Usually it's the kind of thing that a lot of the moms say, well, I can't have extra food in my house. Oh yes, If you have extra broccoli, let me tell you, the kids are not going to be eating all your broccoli by the next meal, right? So it is the kind of thing you try to cook everything as much as possible, and then you can kind of like cook multiple days in a row, right? So if you make 2 days worth of food every day, then every day you're only really making like really like one vegetable and one meat, because most of the time dinner is going to be kind of like a meat and two vegetables or something like that, right? Um, all right, good. So what do I do if I'm having problems, right? I'm like, okay, Dr. Reilly, I get it, right? Five fruits or vegetables, five vegetables, two fruits, meat every day, got it, right? Try to eat more fish. I'm gonna eat tuna fish sandwiches. I'm gonna have, sometimes shrimp or lox for breakfast, and I'm gonna have salmon every Friday, or I'm gonna have flounder on Tuesdays, and whatever. What if you're having problems, right? Because a lot of times, if you're used to having a lot of processed food, then you may not know how to make some of these kind of foods, right? And especially when you start looking at the ingredients, a lot of these kind of foods, you're going to be like, man, how is this ever legal, right? I mean, I had this same experience when I looked at the baby food, right? Which, if you have an infant, you've gotten videos from me that talk about how all the baby foods, 95% of them, are contaminated with heavy metals, things that cause cancer and actually, quite frankly, make them less intelligent, right? Can shave off IQ points. This is horribleness, right? But yeah, nope, that's how the food is. So especially if you're depressed, you have to try to eat as clean as possible, so that way you're not exposing yourself to any of these depressogenic kind of foods, so that way you can get better as fast as possible, because that definitely seems like it's a thing. The quicker you get rid of the depression, the easier it is, right? So yeah, so like I said, I'm not a chef, and I don't have a lot of recipes. So if you're coming here for that, then you've come to the wrong place. But I can give you a guide or what it should look like, and then you can figure out what kind of foods you like yourself, right? And so there's definitely places you can go on the internet to look for healthy recipes, and you'll find ones that align themselves with your culture, right? And so then usually or you can change favorite recipes to things that are more healthy, right? So I'm half Colombian. I like paella. So I make paella now out of cauliflower rice. And when I made it for my mom, who is 100% Colombian, she was like, bueno, right? So it's something that you can do, right? So like Diet Doctor, I mean, some of the things they have there, that website, they want you to pay for because everybody wants your money. But there's definitely things that if you look to see if it has everything that you're supposed to be eating, that's definitely a good way to go. But you have to commit yourself to make a change, right? Because that's the key. That when you change your diet, any change that you make that removes the depressogenic foods and adds the foods that are kind of like the happy foods, then you're going to get better, and that your kid is going to get better, and everything, basically everything will get better, right? So yeah, so then that's it. So I hope this was instructional for you, right? This study is actually a great study, and I hope that we're going to find a lot more studies like this in the future. If you like this video and you think that other people on YouTube should watch it, then all you have to do is like and subscribe, and that tells Google to kind of put it on the fast track for other people when they're looking for foods that depressed people should eat. And I thank you.